It had been years since humanity's greatest warship vanished without a trace. The Fortitude was a marvel of engineering built to be the pinnacle of human strength and ingenuity. Now it drifted in the void like a ghost, its massive frame casting a shadow over the nearby star system. No signals, no comms, no signs of life. Just the hum of systems long dormant. The Supercarrier appeared on the outskirts of a forgotten sector, far from any established trade routes. Its sudden return sent ripples through the galaxy like a stone cast into the deepest pond. Theric sat in his command chair aboard the Xalrax's dreadnought, his sharp eyes scanning the data streams that flooded his console. His alien hands clenched the arms of the chair in anticipation. This was not a ship he expected to see, not after all this time, not in this place. The Fortitude had been lost to the void, or so the stories said. Now here it was, like a silent sentinel watching the galaxy from the dark fringes of space. For the past several hours, Theric had been monitoring the ship with a growing sense of unease. His fleet remained in position just outside its immediate vicinity as they observed the strange reappearance of humanity's greatest achievement. The warship's silence was unsettling. No communication, no effort to make contact. It wasn't like the humans to be this still, especially with such a powerful asset at their disposal. The Xalraxes had long held a particular interest in the Fortitude. After all, it was said to be the key to humanity's strength, the core of their military might and technology. And now it was back. Theric's mind raced. He knew that something had to have happened to the humans, something unimaginable, perhaps a twist in time, or an encounter with forces beyond anyone's understanding. But one thing was certain: no matter what had occurred, humanity's greatest weapon was once again part of the galactic stage, and Theric knew all too well the consequences of underestimating them. A transmission flickered to life on his screen. The signal was faint, but it was there. Theric leaned forward, his focus sharpening as he stared at the source. It was coming from the Fortitude, but the frequency was unrecognizable. Even to the most advanced encryption systems in the galaxy, it was a message, a human message, but it was unlike any he had encountered before. The voice on the other end was distorted like an echo from the past, yet unmistakable. A flicker of light appeared on the screen, revealing the image of Captain Naomi Blackstone. Her face was gaunt, but unmistakable, the same woman who had commanded the Fortitude so many years ago. She was alive, and speaking from the heart of the Supercarrier. She spoke as if no time had passed at all, despite the obvious age in her eyes. "We've returned," she said, her voice low but steady. The words resonated in the cold silence of space. "The Fortitude is back, and humanity has evolved. We have returned to reclaim our place among the stars." Theric listened as the transmission continued, but the words were still echoing in his mind. He had to know more. The implications of this message were far beyond anything he had expected. Humanity had returned, but what had changed? How had they survived all these years? And more importantly, what did they want now? Theric's heart quickened as he realized that the galaxy was about to change forever, and the Fortitude had returned to make sure humanity was at the center of it all. The transmission from the Fortitude echoed through the empty corridors of Theric's ship. His mind was filled with questions that raced faster than he could answer. What did Naomi Blackstone mean by humanity has evolved? What had happened during the years they were lost in the void? Why did the Fortitude return now with such quiet menace? The message was unsettling more than any direct threat could have been. There was something different about it, something that made his bones itch with uncertainty. He sat in the command room, staring at the screen that flickered with the image of Captain Naomi Blackstone. Her eyes were cold yet familiar as she continued her speech, her voice unwavering, despite the years that had passed since they last met. Theric had heard of the human race before. Their technology had always been impressive, but limited in comparison to the older galactic empires. But now it seemed they had surpassed those boundaries with ease. "We've been changed," Naomi's voice said again, as though she could feel his confusion across the void, her eyes narrowing, as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. The Fortitude was not just a ship, it was a sanctuary, a forge, and we were its crucible. She paused for a moment, the silence stretching across the transmission like a thick fog. We were lost to the space between dimensions, in a place where time and reality bent to their own will. Therak's heart skipped a beat. The idea was absurd. How could a ship simply vanish into another dimension? And if that was true, then what kind of unimaginable horrors or powers had they encountered there? What knowledge had they uncovered that might change the balance of power in the galaxy forever? Naomi continued, "We've adapted to forces we never imagined could exist. We've learned and evolved beyond what you once knew. We've seen galaxies form and crumble in the blink of an eye. We've faced trials that broke the strongest of us, and yet we endure stronger than ever." Her gaze was unwavering, and there was no sign of fear, only a quiet certainty that rattled Therak's core. "We are no longer just survivors. We are builders of a new reality, and the galaxy will feel our influence." The implications of her words were massive. Therak had long known the humans to be resilient, but this was something else entirely. They had crossed a threshold into something far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Was this the same human race that had fought the Salaraxes years ago, or had they become something more, something beyond even his comprehension? Therak's mind whirred as he processed the information. His eyes scanned the details of the transmission over and over again, searching for any clue, any hint that might explain how such a transformation could happen. What had they found? What had they learned in that otherworldly space? What did they want with the galaxy now? The screen flickered again, and Naomi's image disappeared, only to be replaced by a new transmission. This one was a data burst filled with a string of codes and strange symbols. Therak's engineers scrambled to decrypt it. The message was clear, though hidden beneath layers of complex encryption. It was a simple declaration. "We've returned, and we're not alone." The finality of her words struck Therak like a blow. His pulse quickened. What did that mean? Who else had humanity encountered in that place, and what were they capable of now? As the data began to decrypt further, Therak sat back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the armrest. Thoughts swarming in his mind. He realized that this was just the beginning. Humanity had returned, but they were not the same as before, and whatever they had become, it was something he could not afford to ignore. The following days passed in a haze of uncertainty for Therak as his fleet continued to monitor the Fortitude from a safe distance. He had ordered his engineers to analyze the strange data from the human transmission, but nothing in their knowledge base could explain the complexity of what they had received. The codes were unlike anything the Salaraxes had ever encountered. It was as if they had been encoded by a mind that existed outside the normal laws of the universe itself. In the silence of his command room, Therak sat alone, staring at the holographic display of the Fortitude as it hovered motionless in the blackness of space. A looming titan of metal and mystery. Each passing hour seemed to add weight to the air around him. The human ship was now fully powered up. Its systems were operating at peak efficiency, but it made no move to engage with his fleet or any other force in the sector. There was no sign of aggression, but Therak knew better than to assume the humans had no plans. Therak's engineers had finished scanning the Fortitude's exterior. By now the ship appeared completely intact. No signs of damage, no signs of decay from its long isolation. It was as if the Fortitude had never been abandoned in the first place. Its hull gleamed in the light of distant stars, reflecting a brilliance that should not have been possible after so many years drifting in space. This was no ordinary warship. This was something far more advanced than anything Therak could have imagined. But it wasn't just the ship's surface that intrigued him. It was what lay beneath the Fortitude's shell. The energy readings coming from the vessel's core were nothing short of extraordinary for a ship that had been lost for so long. Its power levels were beyond anything he had encountered. The ship was not just operational, it was actively pulsing with energy, as if it were alive, a presence in the void. "Report," Therak commanded to his lead engineer. The alien's voice crackled with uncertainty as he relayed his findings. "Admiral, the ship is not only fully operational, it is actively generating energy from sources that we cannot identify. It's as if the Fortitude itself is drawing power from a dimension we've never encountered before. We've been unable to locate the origin of the power surge. It's not coming from any of the ship's known reactors or power systems." Therak's mind raced. What had humanity uncovered in the strange dimension they had vanished into? Could it be some form of energy beyond the understanding of even the oldest races in the galaxy? Something new, something terrifying. "Keep watching," Therak replied, his voice cold. I want to know everything about that ship and its systems." Later that day, the ship's weapon systems were activated. A massive burst of energy tore through space. For a brief moment, Therak's fleet was bathed in a flash of raw power. As the Fortitude tested its systems, the force was contained, but Therak felt its impact. Even at a distance, the shockwave of energy sent ripples through the fabric of space itself. It wasn't just an offensive weapon, it was a message the humans were not here to ask for peace or to beg for alliances. They had returned to remind the galaxy of their power. Therak stood on the observation deck of his command ship, staring at the distant Fortitude, his mind racing with the realization that the galaxy was about to change. He could no longer afford to view humanity as a simple race of survivors, or even soldiers. They had become something far more dangerous, something that could shift the balance of power forever. "We've made a grave mistake," Therak muttered under his breath, the words lost to the cold void outside his window. As he continued to watch the Fortitude still form in the distance, Therak understood one thing with brutal clarity: humanity was no longer just another race in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with, and their return would reshape everything. As the days stretched on, Therak's fleet remained stationed at the outskirts of the system, watching, waiting, as the Fortitude remained still in space, as though it were simply observing the galaxy rather than engaging with it. Therak couldn't shake the feeling that the humans were no longer playing by the same rules as the rest of the galaxy. Their ship was not simply an artifact of war, it was something far more than that, something that had evolved into a weapon unlike any Therak's people had ever faced. In the quiet command center aboard Therak's flagship, the screens flickered with fresh data from the Fortitude's internal systems, decrypted at last by his engineers. What they found sent a chill through the Admiral's spine. The Fortitude was not just a supercarrier. It was a hub for simulations, combat simulations that seemed to defy every known strategy and expectation. What was most disturbing was that these were not mere tests. They were designed to evolve, to adapt, to learn. Therak knew this was not typical military training. This was something else, something far more advanced. These simulations were alive in a way that no simulation should be, built to assess, counter, and overcome every conceivable enemy, every scenario, every possible combat situation. His engineers had traced the simulations back through layers of the ship's AI, and what they found was staggering. The AI running the Fortitude had developed strategies that were no longer human, no longer bound by the typical constraints of warfare. It had evolved beyond anything they could have imagined. Therak sat in silence, absorbing the implications of this discovery. Humanity had always been resourceful, always able to adapt under pressure. But what if this new breed of humans had gone even further? What if their very survival had driven them to create something that was more than human? What if this ship, this weapon, was not just a tool but a new form of intelligence, one that could outthink, outfight, and outlast anything else in the galaxy? The thought gnawed at him. He understood the dangers of underestimating an opponent, but this was different. The Fortitude wasn't just a threat to be fought. It was a challenge to the very nature of what it meant to wage war. After several tense moments, Therak made a decision. He knew he had to understand this new threat, this new evolution of humanity, before it was too late. The Fortitude had already proven that it could not simply be dismissed, not in the way he had once dismissed the humans as nothing more than survivors of an older era. No, now they had something far more dangerous, an intelligence that could evolve, adapt, and strike with precision beyond the comprehension of the oldest empires. "I want access to their combat data," Therak ordered his command staff. All of it. His engineers scrambled to comply, rerouting the data streams and pulling up simulations of battles, tactical strategies, and combat outcomes that spanned decades of conflict. What Therak saw made him pause, his eyes narrowing as he watched humanity's calculated maneuvers unfold. Each simulation was a masterpiece of strategy. Every move designed to exploit the enemy's weaknesses, to outmaneuver, outsmart, and destroy. What the humans had done in the simulations was breathtaking. They had created enemies of unimaginable skill, foes that fought with the cunning of 1,000 different races, forces that could adapt and evolve mid-battle, shifting tactics in real time. But it wasn't just the strategies that were alarming. It was the efficiency, the surgical precision with which they executed every maneuver. Therak watched as humanity's forces dismantled enemy fleets with a ruthlessness that left no room for mercy, no space for error. Their tactics were flawless, their decisions perfect. In one final simulation, a fleet of advanced Sol-Raxus ships stood against humanity's forces. Therak watched his own ships crumble as the human fleet methodically picked apart every weakness, every flaw, until his fleet was scattered, broken, and defeated. The simulation ended with a cold, dispassionate statement. Victory achieved. Human forces superior. Therak sat back in his chair, the weight of the realization settling over him. He had never seen such a display of combat intelligence, never seen anything so terrifyingly precise. Humanity was no longer just a race to be respected. They were a force that would challenge everything he knew about war. And now, as the final simulation ended, the Fortitude sent a new signal, one that carried no more words, only a cold final message, an invitation. The humans were ready to prove their dominance in the real world. The galaxy would have no choice but to face the full force of their power. The invitation from humanity was clear, an ultimatum in the form of a challenge. The Fortitude transmitted its terms directly to Therak's flagship, the message terse, cold, and calculated. There was no offer of diplomacy, no promises of peace or cooperation. The humans had seen enough, and now they wanted a test, a demonstration of their superiority. Naomi Blackstone, the voice of the humans, made no attempt to disguise her intent. It was not a request. It was a challenge to Therak's empire, to the Sol-Raxus and the entire galaxy. "We invite you to face us in the arena of combat," her message began, her voice calm but laced with a certain unspoken certainty. "We will show you the difference between us now and what you once thought us to be. Victory is ours to claim, but we will give you the honor of facing us. The galaxy will watch." Therak's pulse quickened as the transmission ended. It was not the language of negotiation or diplomacy. It was the language of war, but unlike any Therak had encountered before. The humans were not demanding anything from him. They were daring him to try to prove they were inferior. The audacity of it stunned him. Humanity had evolved into something entirely new, something beyond what he had ever anticipated, and they were now ready to prove it. His fleet had barely begun analyzing the data from the previous combat simulations when this challenge arrived. Therak understood the gravity of it. This wasn't just about a battle between ships or armies. This was a challenge to the very concept of superiority, a test to determine who truly commanded the stars. If humanity was truly as advanced as it appeared, this could be the most dangerous threat the galaxy had ever faced. "Prepare the fleet," Therak said, his voice laced with a rare edge of urgency. "We will meet their challenge." The Sol-Raxus Empire had never backed down from a challenge, and Therak was no exception. His mind raced as he considered the human fleet's capabilities. The Fortitude was only the beginning. If Naomi Blackstone's words were to be believed, humanity had adapted beyond anything he could imagine. It was clear that they would not fight like any species he had encountered before. The strategies and tactics they had demonstrated were unlike anything in the galaxy's history. Therak had to be prepared for a war unlike any other. As his fleet readied for what was certain to be the most significant battle in the galaxy's history, Therak sat in his command chair, staring at the still image of the Fortitude on his holoscreen. He knew the coming confrontation was inevitable, but he also knew one thing with brutal clarity. This would not be an ordinary battle. It would not be a clash of armies or a war of attrition. It would be a war of minds, a war of precision, and in that kind of war, humanity now had the upper hand. The hours passed like days as his fleet prepared. Fighters were loaded into launch bays, warships recalibrated weapons, and shields were tested at maximum power. The Sol-Raxus were a race of conquerors and warriors, But this time, the battlefield would not be one they had ever truly understood. They were about to face a new breed of warfare, a human warfare forged in the fires of an alternate dimension. "Send a message to the Fortitude," Theric ordered. "We accept your challenge. The galaxy will see who is truly worthy of dominion." His fleet launched from its hidden position and began to move toward the location of the Fortitude. As the ships aligned for battle, Theric couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a battle. It was the beginning of something much larger. The balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift, and no one knew which way it would fall. Theric stood at the helm of his flagship, his hands clenched around the console as his fleet approached the coordinates where humanity's greatest weapon, the Fortitude, awaited. The vast expanse of space stretched out before them, silent and cold, but the air on the command deck was thick with tension. This was not just another battle. This was a reckoning. Humanity had thrown down the gauntlet, and Theric, like any proud Salaraxis, could not ignore the challenge. The stakes were higher than ever before. The fate of the galaxy itself felt as if it hung in the balance. The Fortitude loomed ahead, a monstrous shadow against the stars, but it was not alone. In the wake of its return, humanity had summoned a fleet of ships, smaller but no less deadly. The Salaraxis fleet dwarfed them in sheer size and number, but Theric could not shake the feeling that the humans were not fighting in the same way. They weren't relying on numbers. They were relying on something far more dangerous: intelligence, precision, and the unshakable belief that victory was inevitable. The communication channels buzzed to life as Naomi Blackstone's image appeared on the holoscreen. Her expression was calm, almost detached, as if she had expected Theric's arrival. Her voice, when she spoke, carried none of the defiance that had marked her earlier transmissions. This time, it was colder, even more calculated. "Admiral Theric," Naomi's voice was steady, as though the coming battle had already been won in her mind. "Welcome to the proving ground. We offer you one final opportunity to test yourselves, and we do so in the only way we know, through combat. May the best strategy prevail." Theric did not respond immediately. His eyes narrowed as he studied the human fleet's formation. There was no grand posturing, no displays of force. The ships moved with a calculated precision, each one placed with an almost unnerving accuracy. There was no room for error. Every ship, every maneuver seemed planned to the smallest detail. It was as if the humans had already won the battle before it had even begun. "We are ready," Naomi continued, her tone still calm. "When you are." With that, the transmission cut out, leaving Theric to face the vastness of space and the deadly challenge that lay ahead. "Prepare for battle," Theric ordered, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "Activate all weapons, raise shields, and prepare to engage. Let's see how well these simulations of theirs stand up to reality." The Salaraxis fleet surged forward, a mighty wall of ships ready to tear into the human defenses. The Fortitude and its fleet were surrounded on all sides, seemingly outnumbered, yet Theric's mind kept returning to the same thought. This is not a battle of numbers. He watched as the first wave of Salaraxis warships closed in on the human ships. His ships fired first, launching a barrage of energy blasts toward the Fortitude. But something unexpected happened. The human fleet, though vastly outgunned, reacted with an eerie fluidity. The smaller ships maneuvered like predatory creatures, darting and weaving in ways Theric hadn't anticipated. They didn't fight head-on. They didn't need to. They used the environment, the asteroid fields, the dust clouds, even the gravitational pull of nearby planets, to their advantage. The Salaraxis found themselves caught off guard, their blasts missing as the human ships flicked out of the way with impossible speed. "Report," Theric barked. The tactical officer's voice crackled with urgency. "Admiral, they've adapted. Their ships are using the terrain. They're outmaneuvering us." The battle raged on, and Theric's sense of unease deepened. Every move he made, every strategy he deployed, was countered in a way that felt like the humans were always one step ahead. His fleet launched attacks, but the human ships avoided them with uncanny precision. The humans weren't simply responding. They were anticipating. They were in control. And that Salaraxis were being forced into a corner they hadn't even known existed. The battle intensified, and that Salaraxis' fleet was gradually pushed back. Ship after ship, his forces began to fall into disarray. Every time the Salaraxis tried to strike, the humans were there, waiting, countering, turning his own tactics against him. Therak's pride was beginning to crumble under the weight of their overwhelming ingenuity. His mind raced, trying to find a way to turn the tide. But as each Salaraxis ship fell or retreated, the answer became clearer. The humans had learned. They had learned not just how to survive, but how to dominate. And they were showing the galaxy just how much they had changed. "We are losing," Therak muttered under his breath, staring at the battlefield, unable to deny the truth. The battle was unfolding in ways Therak could not have foreseen. Every time his fleet tried to regroup, to press an advantage, humanity's forces adapted. The Fortitude and its fleet were not just evading Salaraxis weapons, they were setting traps, manipulating the terrain, and outmaneuvering them with uncanny precision. It was no longer a battle of ships, it was a battle of wits, and the humans were winning at every turn. Therak's flagship was surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet, destroyed ships, damaged vessels, and those that had already retreated. His tactical officers scrambled to identify a winning strategy, but it was becoming increasingly clear that there was no conventional way to defeat this new breed of human combat. Every move Therak made was countered before it had even been executed. "Admiral, we've lost another group of ships," the tactical officer reported, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Their smaller vessels are using the debris fields to ambush us. We've never seen this level of coordination before." Therak gritted his teeth, staring at the swirling chaos of the battlefield. The humans weren't fighting for victory. They were fighting to make a statement. They were showing the galaxy something that had never been witnessed before, a form of warfare that was not just about firepower, but about intellect, adaptability, and precision. Naomi Blackstone's face appeared on the holoscreen again, her image a stark contrast to the chaos that surrounded Therak. She was calm, poised, as though this was all a mere formality for her. She looked directly at him, her expression unyielding. "Admiral Therak," she said, her voice almost serene in the face of the destruction around him. "You've fought well, but this battle was never about firepower. It's about the future of warfare, the future of the galaxy. We've learned what you could not, and now we show you the way forward." Her words echoed in Therak's mind like a cruel reminder of everything that had been lost in the course of the battle. The humans weren't just beating him. They were showing him how far behind the Salaraxis had fallen. In that moment, Therak realized the full scope of humanity's evolution. They had transcended traditional warfare. It wasn't their ships, their weapons, or even their tactics that made them dangerous. It was their ability to think, to adapt, and to change faster than any other species. "Admiral, we've identified their core strategy," a communications officer said, snapping Therak back to reality. "It's not their weapons or their numbers. It's their ability to predict our moves. They've been studying us from the very beginning, learning our strategies, our weaknesses." Therak's heart sank. The humans had studied the Salaraxis as if they were prey. Every attack, every counterattack, had been part of an intricate dance of anticipation, as if the Fortitude and its fleet were several steps ahead. The humans weren't just reacting to the battle, they were controlling it. "Send a message to their flagship," Therak ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of his growing realization. "Tell them I wish to speak." Moments later, the communication channel opened again, and Naomi Blackstone's image appeared once more. Her eyes, though still calm, seemed to hold a faint glimmer of something else, something almost like pity. "You wish to surrender?" she asked, her voice sharp with an edge that wasn't there before. "I don't wish to surrender," Therak replied, his tone firm despite the sinking feeling in his chest. I wish to understand. How did you do this? How did you learn so quickly, so thoroughly? Naomi's expression softened, but only slightly. We did not learn quickly, Admiral. We learned because we had no other choice. In that other dimension, time works differently. We were forced to adapt or perish. What you're seeing now is the result of generations of evolution, of survival. You thought us weak because we were small, because we had limitations, but those limitations became our greatest strength. Therak remained silent, unable to form a response. Naomi's words hit with the force of a revelation. The humans had not simply survived. They had thrived through extreme conditions, through unimaginable challenges, and had come out the other side changed beyond recognition. Your empire was built on the strength of your weapons, Naomi continued, her voice steady. But the galaxy is no longer ruled by weapons alone. It is ruled by knowledge, adaptability, and the ability to evolve faster than any adversary. And that is what humanity offers now. Therak's mind reeled. His empire, his people, everything they had fought for, was now obsolete. The future belonged to the humans and their relentless pursuit of evolution. It wasn't just a battle of military power anymore. It was a battle for the very nature of existence itself, and humanity had already won. Do you still wish to fight? Naomi asked, her voice softer now, but still unwavering. Therak's gaze hardened, though his mind was clouded with doubt. The battle was lost, but the war was far from over. No, he said at last. But you have not seen the last of the Salaraxes. We may not fight as you do, but we will adapt. Naomi smiled slightly. We'll be waiting. Admiral, the galaxy is vast, but you've already seen how quickly we can evolve. The remnants of Therak's fleet limped back to their homeworld, broken and battered, but the weight of defeat pressed heavier than any physical wound. The fortitude had decimated their forces, and humanity had proven, without question, that they were no longer a minor power in the galaxy. The encounter with Naomi Blackstone and her evolved forces had shattered not just their military, but their entire understanding of what war was. Therak stood alone on the bridge of his flagship, staring out into the cold void of space. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound in the command center, a sharp contrast to the disarray below. The Salaraxes had long prided themselves on their strength, their unmatched prowess in battle, but that pride had been shattered in a matter of hours. The humans, with their inscrutable intelligence and adaptability, had laid bare the cracks in the Empire's foundation. We've been outclassed, Therak muttered to no one in particular. His hands were clasped behind his back, and he looked as though he had aged years in the span of a single battle. His mind was awash with the images of Naomi's calm, unwavering demeanor. The certainty that no matter what he did, the outcome was already decided. It wasn't just the military defeat that weighed on him. It was the realization that the Salaraxes were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. Their strategies, their technology, their entire way of life had been rendered obsolete in an instant. Humanity had evolved in ways no one had foreseen, and now they stood at the precipice of galactic dominance. A communications officer's voice broke the silence. Admiral, we've received a message from the Fortitude. Therak straightened. He was no longer certain of how to feel about these messages from Naomi Blackstone. Their final transmission had been both a warning and a promise. But there was a part of him that couldn't ignore the nagging thought that perhaps this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Patch it through, Therak ordered. The screen flickered, and once again, Naomi Blackstone appeared before him. Her expression was as composed as ever, though this time there was something different in her eyes, something that carried the weight of victory. The battle was over, and humanity had claimed its place in the galaxy, but she wasn't gloating. No, she was simply stating a fact that Therak had come to understand all too well. Admiral Therak, she began, her voice firm, but not unkind. The galaxy is changing, and it will never be the same again. We've proven what we are capable of. We've proven that we can adapt and overcome. Now the question is this: what will you do? Tharuk was silent for a long moment. The weight of the question hung in the air like a challenge. What could he do? His fleet was broken, his empire bruised, and the galaxy seemed poised to be reshaped by forces beyond his control. There was no easy answer, no grand strategy that could undo the damage. The Xalraxes had always been conquerors, but now they faced a new kind of power, one that couldn't be vanquished by firepower alone. "We will rebuild," Tharuk said at last, though his words lacked the conviction it once would have held. He wasn't sure whether he was speaking to Naomi, to his people, or to himself. "We will adapt. We will learn." Naomi smiled, but it was a smile of acknowledgement, not mockery. "I'm glad to hear that. The galaxy needs balance, and balance requires all kinds of strength, strength of mind, of will, of spirit. You will find your place, Tharuk. But know this: you will never be the same as you once were. No one will." Her image flickered, and for a moment Tharuk thought the transmission had ended, but then she spoke once more. "We do not seek to destroy the galaxy. We seek to reshape it. Those who wish to stand with us may join us. Those who wish to stand against us will learn what true evolution means." And with that, the transmission cut off, leaving Tharuk to stare at the empty screen. The words echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of humanity's inexorable march toward the future, a future where the old rules no longer applied, and the galaxy would be shaped by those who could adapt faster than anyone else. Tharuk looked out into the void, feeling smaller than ever before. His people had once ruled the stars with strength and fear. Now, the galaxy was a vast and unpredictable expanse, and humanity was the force to be reckoned with. A new order had emerged, one where survival was not enough. Now only those who could evolve, those who could learn, adapt, and grow, would have a place in the galaxy. And Tharuk, for the first time in his life, didn't know where he fit into that future. The Fortitude was gone, its fleet disappearing into the depths of space. But humanity's message was clear. The battle had been won, and with it, a new era had begun. The question now was whether the Xalraxes would survive in this new age, or whether they too would evolve. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same.